Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Quiver Time, and Architect. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, HAIYUE, aka Nifat on Twitter, aka one of the people who I've watched do commentary on like a bunch of different random streams, including the VML and a lot of these kind of organizations that do like Magic tournaments and content for people of marginalized genders. And I don't know, I just really enjoy listening to you talk about Magic. So I was like, what if I just talk to you about Magic? And so I invited you on my show. Hello, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on. Very excited.
Yeah, no, I'm always like fascinated. Like, I love listening to Magic commentary. It's one of, I don't know, I guess as an old grognard, that's just one of the things that calms me down when I'm just having a nice day. And so I'm a fiend for any kind of content. And when the VML started, and you've like streamed other stuff too, right? Beyond just the VML? Like,
yeah, so like commentary wise, yeah. So I do a lot of the I guess online events, the digital events. So I do the Magic Online Champions Showcase,
that's where it was,
which is like the premier Magic Online thing, and I also do the Arena Championships, which is like the top level, I guess, of arena play. So yeah, I did quite a few of these digital events.
Yeah, I was like, where did I first run into? And I'm pretty sure it must have been either the Mox or the Arena Champions. And
that makes sense.
I'm like, oh, here's a new voice. Let me find out who this person is, because that's always makes me happy. But like digital commentary is very difficult. I've learned that because I tried to do it once during the pandemic time. Like Channel Fireball, for some reason, decided to invite me on to try to commentate a match of Magic, and I'm like, I'm a Commander player, right? We don't talk about cards, but it's so difficult. How did you pick up this skill?
It is actually quite difficult, and I think people don't necessarily, when they're sat at home enjoying the streams, really understand how much kind of goes into it from the caster side. Actually, like you, I started out as a big fan of commentary when I first learned to play Magic a few years ago now.
Let's go to that. When did you actually learn to play Magic? Where are you from?
I think. Oh God, that's a complicated question.
That's
a
very complicated
question. But I learned to play Magic. It was around Aether Revolt. Amonkhet was my first pre-release. That was the first time I ever really engaged with the game, like at a store or any kind of organized way. And I was super hooked. And I spent the first 3 or 4 months of learning Magic only watching Pro Tour videos.
Oh my God.
I watched the entirety of the available Pro Tour coverage online.
Oh God.
And I didn't know anything. Like, I barely even knew about the second main phase.
Oh my God.
I was just watching like BDM and Marshall and Gabby was doing a lot of commentary at the time. And just watching them like that. So she was so good, and just watching them like really talk about these cards, and I had no idea what was happening, but I was just really fascinated by like the way they made these players seem like geniuses, right? Just like, wow, look at this thing that they thought to do that nobody else would think to do, and I thought that was really magical.
Yeah. One of the things about, like, first off, that's insane. Like, hey, I just learned to play the game. It's like somebody handing you a basketball and going to play the park. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to watch like 30 years of NBA championships and learn how to play the game. Like, what? Like, the Pro Tour is so different from like normal people Magic. But at the same time, now that I think about it, like, as you were talking, I was sitting there like, if I was sitting there listening to like Marshall or BDM sit and explain like how they go through plays, because the sign of a good commentator is somebody who is teaching you as you're going in a way that doesn't make you feel stupid, but makes you feel like you're in the know, right? And so I'm like, oh, that would actually, if I had a bare level minimum understanding, that would be a really cool way to learn. But also, that's a lot of Pro Tours, and that's a lot of cards from different eras that do very different things.
Oh, and It was, and also, let me tell you, back then, nowadays, if you watch Pro Tour coverage, they put the cards on the screens. Like,
right?
every card that's mentioned, they put on the screen. Back then, it was like, they put one card on the screen maybe every 10 minutes.
Yeah. And it was whatever the whim of the person doing the video was. It wasn't like, right. Maybe it wasn't even relevant to the card. I'm like, guys, tell me what the damn card does, please.
Yeah, and well, actually, that's actually why I really engaged with, I think, Gabby's commentary in particular, because she was so good at actually telling you what the cards did.
Right.
And, I just, even now, still really recall her saying things like, "Oh, here comes Anna Fenza," and talking about, and this was before I started playing, so I had no idea what Anna Fenza, I still don't really know who Anna Fenza is. She sounds like a cool girl, I don't know. And just kind of really taking you through the paces. And that's something that I really try to bring to the way that I do commentary, is that I really want people to be able to follow what's going on, even if they're not paying full attention. Because I think a lot of people are not going to be 100% focused on every single detail that, maybe the top players or maybe your expert co-commentator, they're focused, they're really at the top level, right? They're at that kind of 1%, 2% of Magic players. But everyone else who's watching really just wants to follow along, and they want to, I think, be engaged with the emotional cadence of it. And that's something that matters to me a lot.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think the best commentators are ones that, if I listen to the game as an audiobook, I can still follow along what's happening. Like when you listen to like Patrick Sullivan and Cedric go through like old today, for instance, I was just sitting out like eating lunch and I was just watching some legacy tournament from 2009 or whatever. I just threw it on and I was just like, wow, I don't know any of these decks. I don't know any of these players. And yet listening to them, they tell you exactly what card is played. They tell you what everything does, and they do it in a natural way that's just kind of storytelling. So you don't realize that you're imbibing this information, but you're never feeling lost. Like, I don't know anything about Nick Fit, but by the end of it, I knew how the deck worked, and it was like rad. Yeah, I know. I think that there's a real art to that. And like, when there's a bad commentator, when they're just like, well, guess they're not doing anything this turn. And it's like, but you just, that's it. Give me something, anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something to talk about, and I think that the thing with Magic is that it's just the pacing is so weird for a game. Like if you look at other esports, like if you watch League or fighting games or similar, there's a pace to it that is pretty consistent. Whereas Magic, it's like some turns are extremely exciting and you have a stack that's massive and it's counter and then counter back and all these things of permanents.
And sometimes it's Shota in the tank for 10 minutes and you're like, well.
Right, sometimes it's literally nothing, and you're kind of just working there and you really have to try and get your co-caster to talk through like what's going on in the player's head, what are all these considerations, but at any given point that can break, and the game can just end. So you kind of have to just be on your feet all the time, especially in the digital era. Honestly, like the esports, the arena thing, a game can end at any point.
Right. That's what I was just about to say. I'm like, at least like when you're watching the Pro Tour or something, they have the benefit of seeing the player move. So they're like, oh, something's going to happen so I can wind up my talk and get back into the flow. If they're tanking on arena, you have no idea. You're just like, well, something's going to happen. Let's hope. Right. Or like Magic Online's even worse. There's like nothing.
No feedback. Yeah, at least on Arena you can see like where they're hovering or where they're, what cards maybe they're considering. Magic Online is like a gray slate.
It's so
and some pictures of cards, and then you have to try and bring like an energy, a vibe to it, an excitement to it, and it's difficult, I think.
Yeah, so okay, I need to ask you about that. First off, you started playing in Amonkhet-ish era, and you started mainlining Pro Tour content. How the hell do you get to, I'm going to start commentating over Magic Online, literally the hardest expression of Magic there is. Like, what did you, like, what did you do? How did this go?
What did I do? Well, that's a good question. So actually, the way that it started out was, I'm pretty close with Mani Davudi, who he's on the desk now for the Pro Tour coverage. And I
need to talk to him too. He's very cool.
Oh, you definitely should. We both live in Vancouver. He actually lives like 10-minute walk from me, which is
great. Nice.
And he used to work at this esports arena kind of place, which was basically a warehouse in Richmond where they put in some seats and some computers and you could go and play esports tournaments there. So he ran, I think, some kind of arena tournament. This was like end of 2019 time, and I went to play in this tournament and I lost after 3 rounds or something. Like I was out after 3 rounds, but I was still waiting around for my friends. And he said, "Oh, hi, do you want to jump in the booth? Like, do you want to just give it a go?" And I was like, "Okay, sure."
The game was that for Magic or was that for another game?
It was Magic. Yeah, it was Magic. It was fine. It was arena. It was standard, and also I'd just been playing in the tournament, so I knew what was happening. And
okay, yeah,
it's the meta game. And I was just hooked. He was just like, "Do you want to have a go?" I was like, "Okay." And then in the next few months, then I got involved with VML pretty soon after that, and we built our own production basically from scratch, which was fun. And then I basically started picking up these gigs wherever I could. I would do gigs like 4 hours for $60 of store credit, or stuff like that. Canadian store credit. Yeah, right, exactly. And then I think after a while, I somehow put together a show reel on my MacBook, which is the only time I've ever done video editing, and it was the worst thing ever. I don't know how people who do it regularly manage, because
I pay somebody to do it. Hi, EK.
Yeah. I don't know how EK does it, but Magic. It was yeah, definitely. It was difficult, but then I sent it to a few people, and I think you mentioned those Channel Fireball events that were going on at first summer of pandemic,
when they were desperate for anyone to talk to.
Just desperate for anyone, right? Desperate for anyone. And I think they just thought, what's the worst that could happen? Basically.
Well, they asked me. That's the worst that can happen. They put me and Seth Manfield. I'm a very charismatic person. Seth is a very quiet person. He knows Magic really well, but it's just like
how was that?
Well, you know how when you're in a booth, you need to have somebody to work with in order to have a conversation, in order to have a flow. And you got to give me something. Like, you got to work with me. I can't just do this. I'm like, I realize it's like 11 o'clock at night and we're doing like 4 hours of Yori on mirrors, but come on, bro, throw me a bone.
Oh, yeah. I did some weird shifts on those events. I think they were trying to do some global thing.
Oh, yeah.
Marnie and I did a shift at like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Vancouver time. Yeah. that was those are the days. I don't know.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that it really was like the most miserable standard format. God, it was so bad. Oh, I don't miss Ikoria at all. I mean, I loved Limited, but that Ikoria standard sucked. But yeah, like, so, but I feel like we skipped a bunch of steps here. So were you just, after you learned how to play, did you just start like grinding, or did you start going like FNMs or trying to do Pro Tour stuff? Like, yeah, I'm going to go to the PCQ with my starter deck.
I guess. No, so the first thing I really did was go to Amonkhet pre-release, and then I got hooked on Limited. So I'm still a big Limited fan. I just think it just makes the most sense to me, like as a Magic player. And then I'll go to, luckily the local store I started out at in the UK was pretty small, but it was very friendly, very chilled out, and we were kind of just, we would draft there every week, and I picked the game up pretty quickly, and luckily everyone was super nice, and it was a good environment for learning. And actually, I hadn't really thought about competitive Magic or anything at all until one day one of the guys there, I remember so clear, his name was Alex Watson. He's a really nice guy. Shout out to Alex if he's listening. And he said to me, he was like, "Hi, I think you might be quite good at this game. You should consider going to this GP." And I was like, "What's a GP?" What's that?
I mean, that's a fair question.
Yeah. And they said, well, it's happening in a few weeks. It's in Liverpool or whatever it was. So we went to this GP. And this was about 6 months, I think, after I started playing Magic. And,
oh, God.
Yeah, I know. And then, and it was Ixalan, I remember, triple Ixalan.
Oh, God, the worst.
It was actually quite bad, but I didn't know that at the time because I didn't really know what was good or bad.
Well, yeah, you have no conception. You've only had Amonkhet, which is very different from Ixalan.
Amonkhet, great. Hour of Devastation, loved it. Right, I just instantly really connected with Hour of Devastation, and then went to Triple Ixalan, and I guess I didn't enjoy it as much, but I didn't really mind. Like I just didn't have that same conception.
You're still new enough. Magic, just playing Magic is still fun, right?
So. Right. And I ended up day 2ing that GP.
What?
Which was, I guess, all those months of watching Pro Tour coverage paid off.
I have yet to day 2 a GP, and I've been playing for a very long time.
Well, have you tried watching 3 months straight of Pro Tour coverage?
All right, Randy Bueller, teach me how to play Magic right now.
It was so Rich Hagan.
Oh God, I love Rich so much.
Yeah, and it was actually also, I think that was the time that Luis took a year off from playing to do coverage or something. I think it was like that kind of era. And obviously,
best
one
to
of the
ever
best
do
players of all. Yeah, exactly. And I listened to a lot of like limited resources at the time, and so. And honestly, the story of day 2ing that GP is also kind of wild because
I'm all ears. This is wild.
Well, we went to so you had to 6 and 3 made day 2, and I got to the last round and I was at 5 and 3. And
oh my God!
So obviously my opponent and I were both at 5 and 3. We go to time in the last round because it's
this was a limited GP.
Yeah, limited GP. We go to time, and we know that if we draw, neither of us get through.
Oh, no.
Right? And no one was really ahead. I would say my opponent, who was this very lovely, guy, I think he was called Philip, very nice. And I think he was maybe slightly ahead on board, but I had a lot of cards in hand and I wasn't. Like, I was not behind by enough that I felt like I was going to lose. Sure. And we just sat there and we were like, well, someone's going to have to concede. And I still feel terrible about it to this day, just said, I'm not going to concede. until maybe 10 minutes later, he gave in or something. Honestly, it was not a good feeling. I felt awful that night.
You cheated this poor guy out of a day. I mean, but the thing is, look, though, that's the truth of competitive play, right? Like, look, both of us want to make it to day 2. Day 2, one of us has to lose. If we tie, it's not going to work. So who's going to give?
Right. And it was just
play to your outs.
Eventually someone had to, and I guess I had less shame. So
But also think about that though. If you start like 6 months ago and suddenly you're playing 9 rounds of Magic against people in a very formal rule setting, which is not your store, that's insane.
Oh, it was insane. It was totally insane. Like I had never played more than I think 4 rounds in a row or something.
FNM, yeah, exactly. It's like 7 hours of Magic. This is crazy.
Yeah, it was a lot. But I was so hyped and like happy and excited, I had a good pool and I was just really in that thing. And it was this very weird environment. GPs back then are very different to Magic Fest now. The environment, the gender imbalance, like everything's very different now. And so I was just really in this weird state of mind and I just couldn't give up. But the good news is that the next morning I 3-0'd the first draft, so I was pretty pleased. Like I was like, yes, great.
Wow.
I didn't, waste the goodwill of my opponent from the night before.
I mean, 3-0ing a draft at a GP day 2 is no joke. That's a hard thing to do. And Ixalan draft was better than Ixalan sealed at least. But yes. God, that's still an accomplishment unto itself. How far did you make it?
I think I won 1 round of the second draft. So I think I was like, I don't know, 10.
That's still really good, man. That's still really good.
I was pretty pleased. I didn't cash at 10 and 5 because back then GPs were big and you couldn't really cash. I was like 1 win from cashing.
Yeah.
But I got 1 pro point, which I still have a screenshot of to this day. My only pro point ever.
Hey, you know what? That puts you 1 ahead of me. So that's amazing. That's such a cool story though. And like I don't know. I'm just baffled at that idea though of like, yeah, I'm going to pick up this game. Okay, I think I like this game. I'm going to watch the entire archive of the highest level play. Okay, now I'm going to go to a tournament. That sounds just like that sounds insane. Is quite honestly.
It sounds insane now, but at the time it didn't feel like
But yeah, you're probably just in the vibe, and you're younger.
Yeah,
and
I was just going with it, you know. And the actually the other thing that happened around that time was like a little while before. So actually, Rain, like Autumn Burchett, she actually used to come to my store in London a little bit. This was before I knew anyone in Magic, you know, before all of this. And I really didn't know anything about her. People were saying, "Oh, Autumn's amazing. She comes to the store." People were super proud, obviously, that she played at our store. Like it was this big thing.
Well, yeah, one of the best of the modern era is playing at your store. You'd be completely jumping up and down.
Yeah, and then I think she'd maybe won one nationals, but had yet to win the second one in a row, which is pretty wild. And then she came and she played, and I just remember watching my partner play against her, and something just clicked in my mind. I was like, wow, we've not been playing the same game as the good players, you know? It's not. We thought we were pretty good. We were like, yeah, sometimes I throw this draft at my FNM. I think I'm pretty good at this game.
So let me tell you the story real quick. So I've been playing for a very long time, and at one of the GPs here in California, I was hanging out with some friends of mine, and one of them, her partner was David Ochoa, the famous player who was like, you know, almost Hall of Fame tier, but just decided not to do it because he's like, he bakes bread now. But yeah, so we were just like sitting there and just hanging out, and my group that we were hanging out with, we decided we were going to play like we were just going to play, pack wars. We open a pack, throw some lands in, and just play against each other. And even in pack wars, where you've just got like a random pack of Innistrad and 15 lands, I just got completely shellacked by this guy. And I'm like, this is like, I don't know what happened. And we were just using booster pack of garbage, and he still just dismantled me in like the most like nonchalant way I've ever seen. I'm like, oh, he thinks about Magic in a way that I can't even perceive. Like I can't even conceptualize the way that he's, and like Ochoa is one of the vintage geniuses. So I was like, and like when I've played, I had the chance to play against like Justin Wong, a famous Street Fighter player once. He's like actually one of the best Street Fighter players of all time. And I was sitting there and he was at PAX, and we were like, he's got a stand, like, come play against one of the greatest. I'm like, hell yeah, I've been doing this from. So I go there and I sit down and I got my strats and I pull out my character. I'm like, all right. He sits there and he's got one hand on the fight stick, not just a controller, but like a full on stick, thumb on the stick and fingers on the button. He's holding a conversation with a gent who's running the booth on the side, looking out of the corner of his eye while I'm using like literally like 15 years of my life's worth of all the practice I've done, playing to the best of my possible ability, and literally 2 hits in on him, and I was just perfected. I was like, I've never like these people are not, they're not human. They're not human. I'm at. They're not playing normal. Like, yeah. And that's why, like, when I sit down, I'm like, oh, I look at like Reed Duke playing or something, and I'm like, I could never come up with that kind of line. I don't even understand where this sideways nonsense came from. And that's, I think, why I love Pro Magic so much, because it's just so much fun to watch people do things I can't.
It
like
is.
Autumn is crazy sauce.
Autumn isn't like, there are some players that, you know, and you mentioned Seth, like some people you watch play, and I think that, like, you know, a lot of great players, you watch them on the Pro Tour, you play, and I think most of the time they're making plays that you would make, right? If you're playing at your best, you know, these are the plays that you would make or you would think to make. And then, but sometimes when you watch players, you just have no idea why they've done what they've done. Like, no. I still have that, and I've watched, you know, a lot of Magic, commented on a lot of Magic, and still every so often there's just like a match where I'm like, what is happening? Like, why have they done this? Yeah. And it turns out like 7 turns later that they had calculated everything perfectly. Right? You know?
Like, they just knew, like, oh, you've only got 1 copy of that left in your deck, so I'm going to play in this way and this way to make sure that. And I'm like, so okay. This morning I was watching, like I said earlier, I was watching a legacy tournament from SCG. Sam Black, obviously one of the greatest players of all time, is sitting there playing a legacy elves deck, and he's got 3 glimpses of nature. So every time he plays a creature, he draws 3 cards. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to like play all my things. I'm just going to keep drawing cards. The other person's at 27 life, and he's got like, okay, I need to get like my Crater Hoof Behemoth up to 27 or I'm not gonna be able to win, because you got a Baneslayer Angel that's gonna kill me next turn lethal. It's like a magic puzzle almost. And he's like, okay, I've got he had 2, what is that, Green Sun Zenith, which is like, you can look for a creature and shuffle it into your deck. And he's like, if I play more creatures, I'm going to deck myself. So he had to keep shuffling his Green Sun Zeniths back into the deck such that he wouldn't draw out. And I was like, I can't even, the idea of just green sunning for 0 just to stop yourself from decking so you can drop a Crater Hoof to get this guy from 27 to 0 is insane. And I was like, I play elves like religiously. I would never in a million years ever have come up with like this kind of line. I'm like, how do you think about magic such that you even get there? It's insane.
It's totally insane. And I think, for a lot of them, it's really just like immersion, right? Like it's just total immersion. I was at Minneapolis a few months ago. I went to this like gathering at someone's house, like a Magic Pros house. And again, it was like one of these moments where I was like, wow, these people do not live in the same way, that other people. Like it was the Saturday night, and there were people there who had played day 1 of the PT and they had not made day 2, and they were just at this party like playing Pioneer on a projector, trying to figure out what they were going to submit for the PTQ the next day, while people are just carousing around them. There were 2 different, maybe 3 different money drafts going on at the same time. Oh my god,
that sounds like a blast.
There was a Pai Gao cube. I don't know if you played Pai Gao, but it's a super fun format of Magic. But they had a Pai Gao cube in this house, like a dedicated, and people were just slinging Pai Gao. Like that's it was amazing. Everywhere. They're just surrounded by Magic cards, by Magic, by everything all the time. And that's really the kind of crucible that I think.
Yeah, it's like you just
the talent.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't know. I find there's a sense of like dedication there, but then there's also like, as a dad, I sit there and go like, well, what are you going to do next year? And you're just like, there's a point where you're like, this is not good. This is going to carry you so far, but we haven't gotten there yet. So I'm going to let somebody else's kid deal with that. But dragging me back on track, because I tend to, yes, listeners, I tend to go places. But I'm going to come back here for a second. So you started doing commentary with Monty, and then you started just like doing more commentary and stuff for that. But where did the VML come from? So the VML is the Venus and Mercury League, and it's like this cool like program that you guys started to help kind of balance the gender disparity in Magic. And I think it's a really important thing. And I think it's, especially one thing is just, I've noticed over the past few years, like let's say past 7 years or so, is that there's a huge trans population of people playing Magic. And like, there's a lot more women playing Magic and a lot more like, non-cis males playing Magic than I ever imagined. But now like at Magic Fest, you see a huge balance as opposed to like at GPs where it was like, 99% dudes. And then, oh, are you a girlfriend of somebody who's playing here? Versus now where you go to like Minnesota or Philadelphia and it was like, there's women everywhere. It's insane how different it's become. And I mean, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it is really, really different. And there's a couple of things like the VML, I guess, to rewind back to the VML.
Yeah, let's go back. I jumped again.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Like the basically how it started. This is
going to be a free flowing conversation.
The best kind. We started out in January 2020, which is of course the best time to start anything. Not that we knew that at the time.
I started this show in January 2020. I know exactly.
Oh, nice. We could be classmates in our projects. And we essentially had a group of maybe 20, 24 people who were we were the GP grinders, the first time I walked into that GP, the one that I dated, it was like 1,500 men and 50 people who weren't obviously men. Like it was right. Literally that bad. Like you could count, like you could look around the room and count.
Oh yeah.
And people did. But then, which was shocking, I think, because I'm pretty outgoing. You know, I'm not really phased by very much, but that really was kind of a shock to the system. I'd never really been in that environment before. And so when we started the VML, it was like this group of people who basically all knew each other through the GP like PTQ circuits, whether that's like mostly in North America. And the Caroline and I actually got involved. We were like in season 1, we were helping out and stuff, but it was like season 2 that we kind of started, that we took over. We basically promoted ourselves and decided that we were gonna run this thing. And in the beginning, it was competitive only, so we just had this league. And we
can you explain what it is a bit?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll explain what it is now, which is that it's a community first and foremost, but within that there's this competitive league, and the competitive league is, I guess, really the flagship event, which is every season it's like 10 weeks long, 10 weeks of competition, where in the first 7 weeks, all the players are split into divisions. So you're in a division, there's 8 people per division, and you spend the first 7 weeks playing round robin. So you get to play 7 weeks of Magic regardless of how well you do, which we think is pretty important actually in this kind of structure. And the cool thing is that you only play 1 match every week, and you know who you're going to play throughout the time. Like, we publish the schedule at the beginning, which means that you can like start, as the season gets on, you can start looking back and seeing, okay, my opponent played this deck the week last week, and then they played this deck the week before. Yeah, and you can metagame, you can level, and then there's always this, you know, if you metagame too hard, maybe they all zig when you zag, you know, and there's fun. All this stuff going on. It's really fun. And then at the end of that, we have the playoffs. So we take the top finishers from each division, and they go and play a single elimination bracket until we get to a winner, basically. And we have coverage every week, and it's basically this whole community that has grown up around this tournament. And the cool thing is that ever since season 3, and we've just, at the time of recording, we've wrapped up season 10 and we're about to do our championships. He has 10 seasons of the VML. Crazy.
That's amazing.
And since season 3, we've been very grateful to Wizards of the Coast, because they've supported us with these invites into the professional circuit. So
yeah, like right I've seen it on Arena, even like, hey, the VMLs thing is going on. I'm like, oh, that's so cool that the Arena splash screen has your program in it. I love that.
Yeah, it's I love that. Like, that was a really cool thing that they were able to support us with. And you know, even stuff like, even for people just seeing a splash screen in Arena in the client that says, hey, people of marginalized genders are welcome here, is really important. And we get these messages all the time, people saying, I had no idea something like this existed. It's like so affirming to see from Wizards that, you know, I've never felt comfortable in a space before, etc., etc. So it's pretty cool. And, you know, the players then go on to play in regional championships, and at our year-end event, which is our VML championships, they get to compete for Pro Tour invites, which is pretty sweet as well. So basically we started out with this view of the competitive scene, where I think it was, the stats were from a few years ago now, but it was something like 35% of Magic players didn't identify as male, but only 5% of competitive players didn't identify as male. So there's a huge disparity between those numbers. And it's not about ability. Like, with the starting point is, we know many people who want to be competitive and want to get into it, but there's all these reasons that they can't. Like, for example, you know, femme people are still, you know, unfairly burdened with more childcare than their male counterparts, and so it's harder to take a weekend off to do a weekend event. Right? Like, that's just a classic thing, that it's not the fault necessarily of organizers that are making these weekend tournaments, but unfortunately that's the standard model that people are expecting, and it just doesn't work for a large percent of the population. So the way that we do it at the VML is, each week you can play your match whenever you like. You can just arrange it with your opponent, and then so it doesn't matter, you know, whether time zone difference or whether you have work at weird hours or whatever. It's just, you can usually find some time within a week that's working for both of you. And I think that's a part of it that's really appreciated by the players.
that sort
sure.
of thing works at your scale, but it's hard to do at like large tournament scale, right? Like, I think I think there's a validity to what you say, especially with, like people who have economic challenges or people who have families and stuff to try to be able to get out there and do the grinder circuit. And it's I don't know that there is this kind of system that you can do, especially for our game, which involves face to face, that would be more flexible like that. Because as I think about it, like I haven't been able to go to a lot of tournaments. I'm starting to be able to go out now more because my child is older. But for
Mm,
years I couldn't because I'm not going to leave my wife at home alone with a young child by herself. But now that he's
right.
more independent and stuff, I feel more comfortable being able to go out to like things like Minnesota or Philly. But yeah, that's a huge challenge and huge burden. And then there's also the intimidation factor of like you go there and people are just giving you crap all the time or microaggressions or making your life just miserable in outside of the game ways, right? Just like
Right. Right. And that's
unnecessarily BS.
totally honest. And that's actually why we really talk about it in terms of barriers.
Mm,
And that's like I think the lens that we try to view things through, like we don't really take the view that people that there are legions of sexist magic players out there who are deliberately targeted. Like there's obviously
uh,
a small minority that is the
sure,
case
but
about, but actually most of the barriers are not intentional. Like a lot of times it's just that maybe the bathroom facilities are not good, and so the store doesn't feel like it's comfortable to play in, or maybe this event, there's no one to travel to this event to, and people don't feel safe staying on their own, or any number of these things which aren't really anyone's fault necessarily, like intentional faults, but it's just that these scenarios don't
it just
necessarily
happens, right?
kind
Like
of, they
it's
just don't serve the needs of our community as well. So something that we really are trying to do as well is kind of not only create a tournament and not only get people into the competitive scene and to flourish in our system, but also to equip them with the tools to actually go out into mainstream tournaments, into
mm,
other events, and feel confident and feel like they're capable of having people to go with, having networks, having support, and just feeling like they're empowered really to go out into these other events. And we get this question all the time, which is like, oh, why are you segregating yourselves, or whatever, I'm sure
I am
you've heard the
familiar with
refrain.
this song
Yeah.
before.
but and actually, honestly, I actually don't really mind talking to people about it, because the way that we really see it is that we are equipping people with the tools that they didn't have before. Like
Right.
we don't believe that people should be given invites to events just for diversity. We think that people should be able to compete for invites in an environment that they are comfortable in and they can perform their
Right.
best in.
It's not about giving people like a easy way in as much as just making sure that everybody's got the same ability to enter at all. Right. Like
Right,
just making sure that we're all
exactly.
starting at the same tier. And some people you just need to like, I mean, you see these arguments with race and with like gender and stuff a lot, which is that it's like people get like, oh well, I'm not getting a special invite. I'm like, well, you've been able to go to all the tournaments just fine. Like these
Right.
people can't go to the tournaments. That's why this exists, so that they can also compete at the same tier as you. They're not. Nobody's getting a buy. Nobody's getting like free passage to
No.
the top eight. This is just
Right.
let me in the door, right? Like that's
Right.
all it is.
Right.
And
And
yeah,
sorry, just kind of build on that also, like another thing that really is that um you once you're in the door, there's also this whole process, right? Like the the thing is that traditionally, if you think about the people who've done well in the pro scene over the years, there've been a lot of protesting teams, networks, people, there'll be a 15 pros that get a house together before each event
mhm.
or whatever, and that was the standard model. And the way that people were invited to these teams was pretty it was a pretty opaque process, should we say, like, kind
It
of
was a
based a little bit
very
more on
nepotistic, let's say.
little, yeah,
Well,
it's
not
more
nepotism,
about
but more like
connection.
just your friends. Like, oh yeah, I play
Right.
against this guy, so I'm going to invite him. Well, if these people
Right.
can't get into the tournament to play against these people, they can't make those connections and get onto those testing teams, right?
Precisely. And I think one of the things that we are most proud of, really, that has kind of sprung up as a sister project slash, you know, friends of the VML thing is the pro testing team Sanctum of all, who are
just
an
gave us a
open
Pro Tour winner.
invite. Yeah, I mean they're like an open invite a testing team, and they have some awesome members in it. Like open invite to any people of marginalized gender who qualify to the Pro Tour, not just through the VML. And they have come up with multiple. They've broken the format multiple times. They have some excellent players, and I think that we really don't see it as here's an invite. We really see it as the invite is the beginning, and then you need to build these long-lasting networks that are going to have the ability to create a whole cohort of players that turn up. And you don't have this effect where every few years there's a Melissa DeTora or there's an Autumn Burchett, there's an Emma Handy, Carmen Handy now, of course, and
Klamparan, she just got married.
Carmen, oh yeah, of course, Carmen. I'm so sorry. Carmen.
Yeah, like
I'm actually casting the marks next week with Carmen. So it's all good. I just have this visual image of the time when Carmen and Autumn both top eighted the same event. I think it was like the grand finals. It was like some big major event, and it was awesome. Anyway, so and we are used to this kind of trickle of representation at the top, but now what we want to do is really bring up a whole lot of people, incubate really a bunch of talent at the same time.
One of the things, like, I don't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, go.
One of the things is that, like, we hear this a lot in affirmative action issues in terms of diversity at workplaces outside of just Magic, in terms, which is that, like, people are like, oh yeah, we hired the so-called diversity hire or whoever it is, we gave them the chance to come in, and they're not good at this job and they're bad, so we're going to let them go and go back to the standard cis white dude that we had before. And this reinforcement that we get is that people aren't given the chance to learn, to fail, to grow, so they can't do the job at the same tier that you want the other person to do. The other person's had all the experiences in the world. They've had 20x years of chances that they've been able to do. So the idea is not necessarily that you're trying to just like you're not cheating. You're just trying to give people, catch them up to where they should be at the starting line. Right? Like bring them up to where, so that when you guys start at the race, you've still got all four wheels on your car, right? Like it just feels sometimes
yeah, totally. I mean, from the very beginning, and Caroline always says this, she's the other co-chair of the VML, and she was very instrumental in us growing as well. And she always said that really the goal was to walk into an event and not have to think about it at all. Like it just wouldn't occur to you to think about gender. And that's really the kind of end game for us, in a way, that we just want to reach this state where
to focus on the event.
Right. And Magic, it just isn't, the gender thing just isn't a problem, like at all. It doesn't cause any issues. It's just everyone's happy, everyone's comfortable. And I don't know, that we're really trying to replicate 25, 30 years of these networks, existing among the male community, and we're trying to kind of make that from scratch in a couple of years. So obviously we didn't see results straight away, but now I think recently we're really happy to see a lot of people kind of do very well on the SCG circuit, previously on the SCG circuits, and then also on the NRG circuits. And I think recently, last year, the top 16 NRG like finals invitational event type thing was, I think, a quarter of the field for people of marginalized genders, which is like huge for that level of play in Magic. So we're very pleased, I think, with some of the things we've achieved. We have people who met through the VML, and they now always go to events together, or always.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And for a long time, WOTC had this thing where every time a woman or somebody would pop up at the tournament, like a Melissa DeTora or Carmen, or even before Jackie, I forget what her last name was, but Jackie Lee. And like anytime a woman would do really good, WOTC would swoop in, hire them immediately, and then take them away. And I'm like, how do we build a community if you keep taking the people? I mean, look, on the one hand, for all of the problems that WOTC has, and for all the things that they do that are very troublesome and irritating to us, one of the things that they've done incredibly well is build up the diversity of their own internal teams to start making more like reflection of the player base within this the design teams. So you've got people like Arya I forget what her last name is, but it's a long Japanese
Chandani.
last name. Yeah, Carmen Chandani in there, and then you've got like Carmen, and you had all of these other people, and there's like a whole lot of trans people and a whole lot of pro playing trans people who are suddenly just making Magic cards, and you've got a lot of women who are on the design teams. You've got a lot of multiracial diversity going on. So they're starting to really, I mean, Ovidio Cartagena, who is their art director, has just been like completely blowing the doors off, making the game look incredible.
Incredible. Art direction has been insane the last few years.
So seeing like this kind of, it's the change. When you've been watching this game for a long time, you can see these changes coming in waves, and it's never been as good as it is now. I mean, the fact that we even have like multiple people of marginalized genders and minority races and stuff showing up on the Pro Tour, and even just playing in the Pro Tour at all. There's only like 300-400 people on the tour. It's like getting huge now. It's incredible, and I think your success is really resonating. It's really fantastic to see.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. Like I think sometimes when you're on this side of it, when you're on the inside and trying to make things happen and trying to push for this or that or the other, it can sometimes really feel quite lonely.
Sometimes you have to stop and pull back and look and actually just see.
Yeah, right. And I think Aria is a great example actually of that you're bringing up, because Aria really
she grew up in the VML.
She'd given up on Magic. Yeah, she used to play Magic before VML, and then she'd given up, and she thought that the environment was bad. And then when the VML started, she actually emailed us. I remember, like, I think season 3 she emailed us, but she didn't quite make it in time for the registration, and then she came in for season 4, and her talent was just astounding. Like, immediately you could tell. The first time I covered one of her matches, I was like, we're seeing something special here, because she was just playing some weird blue-white control deck, and it was Kaldheim or Theros Beyond Death era, and she played this awesome combo with this random 5-drop that when it comes in, you make tokens equal to your devotion to white.
Yes, it's like a soldier. It's like one of my favorite cards. It's
some kind of god thing. And then she played this card called like Mystic Reflection, which is like every time the next time tokens come in, they come in as copies of target creature. So you could like make all your tokens copies of that soldier thing that then made more tokens, and Arena just broke.
Welcome to Commander. That's what we do here.
Yeah, maybe I should play come up. But that's the thing, like in Standard, it's very rare to see that kind of thing, and just coming out of nowhere. Like, it wasn't a known deck, she just came up with it, and she won that season, she won another season. Like, she's just incredible. So and then of course WotC swoops in and
like I said, they come, they find somebody good, and they just take them.
We've had a couple actually. Ellie of the Veil,
one of my dear friends on the CAG with me. Also, one of the most brutal deck builders I've ever met in my life. She's like on the casual play team, and I'm like, that's a lie. That chick is the spikiest spike I've ever seen in my life, and her decks just like punch you in the face with your own hand, and you're like, why? Why did I do this? No, she's brutal. I love her so much. But
I love her so much. And actually, I remember the episode of Game Nights that she was on, and I was so happy because she actually negated something. I was like, yes, counter spells. Finally.
You don't do that where I come from.
I'm a big enjoyer of blue mana, let's just say.
Okay, like
I'm sorry, viewers.
If you haven't seen it, there's an episode of Game Nights that had Rachel Agnes on it. I forget, like, she also another one, like the hyper vintage players who now works at WotC. And her and Josh Lee Kwai neither of them were playing blue decks, and they got into a counter war. And literally were like 6 cards deep of counter spells of using black and white weirdo. I don't know where this card even came from. Counters. Like, I've never seen a counter spell war with no blue mana on the table. It was insane. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, y'all should look it up. It's like very early Game Nights. Because one of the things is, and Commander is actually a good segue here, because one of the things, I don't know if you're familiar with, like CEDH, which is competitive Commander, competitive Elder Dragon Highlander, has, for some reason, one of the hugest collections of like trans folk I know who just love to play CEDH, or like trans folk, or like, marginalized gender types, and just, I don't know what it is about like playing cutthroat, brutal Commander that attracts them, but It's just like, if you want to find a trans Magic player, just go look for a 100-card pile that's got 38 counter spells in it, and you'll be right there.
I mean, you just need an outlet, you know?
Yeah.
I think to me, to some extent, like I really just clicked with kind of blue cards from the start, right from the beginning, which is, again, kind of insane, I guess. But there's just something about Magic and competitive Magic in particular where you know what you're there for, which I think is something that is maybe underrated. Like, you know, you and your opponent or opponents are there for a specific purpose. Everyone is trying to win. Everyone is communicating very clearly, usually in a competitive environment. And you know that you have free reign to do anything within the rules, of course, that you want. You can be as harsh as possible, as mean as possible. You can
there's no hard feelings, man. We know.
You know hard feelings, and if it happens to you, that's part of the game. And if you do it to them, that's part of the game. And I think that for a lot of people who maybe have been socialized in a way where they have to, you know, be the social kind of glue, or, you know, do that emotional labor a lot of the time to make social situations good or make people feel good all the time. It's an outlet for
I'm just gonna cut you and it's okay.
Like, right. Right. It's like, yeah, you know,
it's like, have you ever watched Maria Bartholdi play Magic? It's brutal. Like, yeah, you're exactly right. I'm sorry.
She's a vocals player, right? No, she's a vocals player. Yeah. That's not fair Magic.
No, it isn't. Oh my God. No, you're absolutely right though. And that's one of the things, like, I'm known for being kind of like a cuddly, happy, I want everybody at the table to have a good time player. That's why I do casual Magic, and that's why I do Commander, right? That's my focus. However, when we sit down to play 60 card or 40 card, I'm going to try to rub you into the dust, and that's just going to happen, and you're not going to like it. I've had times where I played like Magic against like fans or whatever, who are like, oh yeah, let's, you know, play limited, or let's play something, and I just like destroy them, and they sit and they're like, but you're supposed to play like weird. I'm like, that's Commander. No. Here, the agreement is that you and I are going to sit down, and one of us is going to get up. And it's like, it's like,
that's the fighting game culture,
like, right? Mentality. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's like, look, man, when it's one-on-one, we know what we're here for. There's like, I don't feel, if you crush me in a one-on-one game, I'm cool. I get there was only going to be one way out of this. At a multiplayer game, it's different, because now we're spending 2 hours together, and I want you to feel like your time was well spent. But when we're playing a tournament, or we're a GP or we're a Pro Tour or whatever, crush me or be crushed, right? Like, that's just kind of how it goes.
And honestly, it's better to get crushed. It's better to get crushed than lose slowly. I tell you that. Yeah. Like, every single time, give me a complete, you know, give me a 15-minute loss to burn over a 45-minute loss to, yeah, every single time, you know. Dancing control, no. That's, you know, I like blue cards, but prison, that's not fun.
Oh God. Just find a win condition. I hate when there's like, yeah, okay. Do you remember that was that one game, Stanislav Sivka? No, not Sivka, but Ivan Floch. He was in a Pro Tour, and his only win con was literally shuffling the deck until you decked yourself. Like, it was just like Elsewhere Flask or whatever it was. Just like,
yeah.
I'm like, oh God, come on.
Well, this is the thing, because after the glorious victory of my first GP, my second GP, I made the horrendous immortal mistake that I would never make again, which is I literally actually took WinCon-less blue-eye control.
Why would you do?
Well, I didn't know, Chef. I didn't know. Nobody told me.
Why would you?
I was just like, oh, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, I love this card. What if I took this blue-eye control deck that has no win cons other than Teferi tucking himself?
That is the most miserable.
I think I had a pair of torrential Gearhogs, and maybe an approach of the second sun in the sideboard or something. Like, it was actually torture.
That's not better.
Yeah. No,
it's not even fun for you. Forget the opponent. It's not fun for you after like the third game of that. Like,
no,
oh God, just
the main win con was like despair, I think.
Yeah, your despair.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's one or the other. It's like you said. One of us is walking away.
This has been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Oh my God. Windless blue light control. You should have told me that. I wouldn't have had you on in the first place. Monster.
Yeah, I tend to save that one for the end. I sandbag it. Just get that guard down with the fun like story about watching PT coverage.
Okay, cool. Well, if people wanted to find you or find out more information about the VML or anything like that, where could they go?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm Niphet, Niphettte. I'm also on Mastodon at kind.social, which, if you haven't checked out Mastodon, I love Mastodon. It's so lovely there. It's just full of pleasant people living their lives. And and the VML, actually, it's interesting because we're in transition right now, so I don't know what it's going to necessarily
that seems
be
fitting
when
for the VML.
This comes out. Yeah, true. But basically, I guess the big exciting news is that we are filing for nonprofit status. So we're actually going to become a proper charity, and that will enable us to do a bunch of work that we hope to achieve in the community. But I don't want to talk too much about it because it's ongoing, at least at the time of recording. So,
that's
but
phenomenal.
You can check out vmlmtg.com is the website, and we're on every platform right now as VMLMTG, and I'm sure we still will continue to be.
That's fantastic. And as always, my friends, you can find me at Gears, or I guess on Mastodon or Blue Sky, or I'm everywhere. It's easy to find me. I'm not hard to find. And you can find me on Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays, thanks to my editor, EK. You can also find me on my other two podcasts, Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic, or Chronicles of Dragonlance. And, God, I've got a lot of just stuff. I got a lot of stuff. Anyways, remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.